This is Peter Helland on the show Israel, and Dr. E. Michael Jones is back on again. And one of the reasons is that the former Pope Benedict wrote an article in the July-August edition of COMMUNIO, but only in German. So it's kind of gotten steam, and it's got a lot of reaction. And he's been accused of being an anti-Semite and things like that. And so the scripture we're going to start out with is the scripture that's kind of the real sticking point in Catholic Jewish dialogue. It's 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 15. The Jews who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets and have persecuted us, and they please not God and are contrary to all men, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles that they might be saved, to fill up their sins always, for the wrath has come upon them to the uttermost. So, Mike, you're going to jump in, but when you have scriptures like that, and we've always mentioned John 8:44, and these are our lifeblood for a Christian, these scriptures.
Right.
We can't surrender them, we can't water them down, but we still want to maintain healthy dialogue with Jews. Okay?
Well, to give you some indication of how that dialogue is going, last week or 2 weeks ago, the European Jewish Congress met in Vienna, and Rabbi Ariel Musikant co-authored an article on anti-Semitism, and one of the conclusions that they came to was that a warning label should be placed on the New Testament because of anti-Semitic passages in the New Testament. And one of the prime examples of anti-Semitism in the New Testament is blaming Jews for the death of Jesus Christ, which you just quoted here. That's exactly what he said there.
Well, that's St. Paul. Says, Paul, who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophet, and it says that many times. Peter says it.
So there you have it. There you have it. So that's this is the what should I say? This is the outcome of over 50 years of Catholic Jewish dialogue. Okay, with the hopeful moment at Vatican II, where there's going to be a new era dawning and all this other type of hopefulness. After over 50 years, now the Jews want to either ban the gospel, accuse it of hate speech, or have warning labels placed on the Bible. So this is the situation that we are in right now. The Pope has entered into this discussion. The Pope was involved in this from the beginning. I'm talking about the Pope Emeritus Benedict Joseph Ratzinger, was involved at the Second Vatican Council, was involved in the documents, and in the COMMUNIO article you mentioned, he talks about the fact that Auschwitz has created the demand for a new approach to the Jewish question.
And, you got that? We just got that at the Notre Dame Library.
Yeah, it's in COMMUNIO. This is the first sentence of the article. Seit Auschwitz ist klar, dass die Kirche die Frage nach dem Wesen des Judentums neu bedenken muss. So since Auschwitz, it's clear that the Church must rethink the question of the existence of the Jews, the Judaism. So there you have it. That's the beginning of the article, and he goes from there into a whole kind of exegesis of the whole thing. And toward the end of it, he's trying to. I'm going to have to put it in clear terms here, because he doesn't really do that in the article. He's trying to square the circle here. And the circle that needs to be squared comes basically in two parts. Okay, the first part is the covenant is eternally valid. Now, this was unknown to the Christian world until 1980. No one ever heard this before. And in 1980, Pope John Paul II visited a synagogue in Mainz, and this is where he said that. Now, what Pope John Paul II neglected to say at this point is, which covenant are we talking about? And Ratzinger, in his article, goes into detail about that there are many covenants. The
Abrahamic covenant is like...
Abrahamic covenant, okay, the Noahide covenant, the Mosaic covenant. There are three right there, and he says it's clear that the Abrahamic covenant valid for eternity, okay, because everybody's included in that. And then he gets to the Mosaic covenant, and then we got to, well, what are we going to say about the Mosaic covenant? Okay, it's there are certain things we can't. Is it eternally valid? If that's the case, where is the temple? You need a temple, a priesthood, and a sacrifice to fulfill the Mosaic covenant, and they're not there. Okay, and you also run into passages in the gospel, which is like Mark 12, verses 1 to 10, known as the parable of the wicked husbandman. A man planted a vineyard, he fenced it round, dug out a trough for the winepress, and built a tower. Then he leased it to tenants and went abroad. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them their share of the produce from the vineyard. But they seized the man, thrashed him, and sent him away empty-handed. Next, he sent another servant to him. They beat him about the head and treated him shamefully. And then he sent another servant, and him they killed. Then a number of others, and they thrashed some and killed the rest. He had still someone left, his beloved son. He sent him to them last of all. They will respect my son, he said. But those tenants said to each other, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they seized him, killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. Now what will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and make an end of the tenants and give the vineyard to others. Have you not read this text of Scripture? It was the stone rejected by the builders that became the keystone, and this was the Lord's doing, and it is wonderful to see. And the Jews, would have liked to arrest him, because the Jews, realized that the parable was aimed at them. Mm-hmm. But they were afraid of the crowd, so they let him alone and went away. Well, now he goes to great length to say, he meaning the Pope, goes to great length to say that nobody believes in substitution, which is the word, the literal word in there, or what we would call supersessionism. Well, this parable seems to argue against it, doesn't it? It seems to me that the people we're talking about, the Jews, were given this vineyard, and when they weren't doing what God's will, it was taken away from them, and it was given to other people, namely to the entire world, the Gentiles, whatever you want to say. So it sounds as if that's an argument against the whole covenant operation. So the first thing we have here, Pope John Paul II in Mainz announces the covenant, not specifying which one, is eternally valid, and suddenly that becomes the pillar for theological exploration. Since that time, it's not in Nostra aetate, which Ratzinger says in his articles, not in Nostra aetate. So
didn't people assume that it was?
I think they have. I think they probably assumed that it's from all eternity that people have been talking this way, but it's only since 1980. And as we used to say, one swallow does not a spring make. One statement of a pope does not a magisterium make here. Now, what is the other pillar upon which this is resting? The German Catechism says very clearly, Die Taufe ist heilsnotwendig. Baptism is necessary for salvation. Now, this is the other part, and now we've got to square this circle. Okay? Is baptism necessary for salvation? Well, the Pope here, to get back to the controversy, wrote the article, and then over the course of the summer, they received a letter to the editor from a Wuppertal theologian by the name of Michael Böhnke, who wrote in the following letter to the editor, or actually an article, in which he said, the article that Benedict wrote for COMMUNIO indicates a problematic understanding of the Jews and has completely passed over their suffering in silence, which the Christians have inflicted on Jews. And then he goes on to say that the Pope Emeritus completely tries to completely ignores Nostra. I'm translating this from the German, so completely ignores Nostra aetate, paragraph 4. And in spite all of his protest to the opposite, tries to just pass over it with some type of Christological window dressing. And his essay is therefore just guaranteed to get rid or put an end to any notion that Joseph Ratzinger is a great theologian. So those are harsh words. Okay, so in other words, Ratzinger is betraying Vatican II in this article. That's the accusation. Well, apparently this annoyed Ratzinger no end, because he came back and said that what Böhnke has to say is grotesque nonsense. Direct quote, grotesker Unsinn und hat nichts mit dem zu tun, was ich darüber gesagt habe. And it has nothing to do with what I said. Ich weise deshalb seinen Artikel als eine in höchstem Maße unwahre Unterstellung zurück. So I reject his article as a completely untrue misrepresentation, and I reject it. Okay, and then he goes on to say, and this is the key word that made the headlines over here. He says, I've made it perfectly clear in my article that we have no intention of creating a mission for the Jews. It's not in the future. It's not foreseen, and it's not necessary. Eine Mission der Juden ist nicht vorgesehen und nicht nötig.
No, I thought that was already. Everybody accepted that that's been the position.
Well, first of all, I don't know exactly how that deals with what he's saying here. But he goes on to say, für Israel gelte nicht Mission, sondern der Dialog. Oh, say, for Israel, we don't need a mission or a missionary activity. We need dialogue.
And when he says Israel, he's kind of assuming the Jews there when he says that
I think he's referring to the Jews. Now, that's problematic as well, isn't it?
Of course.
I mean, once again, which Israel are we talking about? The new Israel or the old Israel? The church was traditionally the new Israel. Well, are we that? That sounds supersessionist to me. The new Israel as opposed to the old Israel. And let's be perfectly frank here. The rabbis don't like it. They don't like this kind of talk. So even after 50 years of dialogue, they're not happy. And so that led to, the same essay led to an exchange of letters between Benedict and the Viennese Ober Rabbi, Supreme Rabbi, Aria Folger. And in that letter, the Folger attacked Benedict as an advocate of supersessionism, that the church is the new covenant, and that it replaced the old covenant, which was the Jews. And then he goes on to say that this teaching of the church is ahistorical revisionism that ignores the real suffering that the doctrine of the ad versus Israel has caused to Jews for centuries.
Well, the book of Hebrews is constantly saying stuff like this, Hebrews 8. And it's saying, it's the Lord speaking. And Paul's, the author of Hebrews is quoting the Lord. In that he saith, a new covenant, he has made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxes old is ready to vanish away. This is written before the fall of...
yeah, well, did Paul consult Pope John Paul II before he wrote that?
I mean, the church has excellent ground to base their theology off of these scriptures.
Where did John Paul II get this then? No one had ever heard of this before this. And he suddenly announces it, and now it's a pillar of Catholic-Jewish dialogue. Everybody has to accept this as somehow the part of the magisterial teaching of the Catholic Church. It appeared once. In almost 2,000 years, never appeared, and finally after 2,000 years it appears once. And suddenly it's the pillar of ecumenical dialogue. Now, let's take this seriously then. So Ratzinger's conclusion here is, so there's no mission to convert the Jews anymore. What we need is dialogue. Dialogue. Okay, well then let's get to the cut to the chase here. Cut to the chase. The other pillar is die Taufe ist heilsnotwendig. Baptism is necessary for salvation. So let's have the dialogue be about, is baptism necessary for salvation?
Well, they can't change that position.
It's in the German Catechism. I'm quoting directly from the German Catechism. It's in the Catechism. It's the pillar. This is not new. This didn't appear in Mainz in 1980. It's a long-standing tradition. Okay, we all know that baptism is necessary for salvation. So, dialogue. Is baptism necessary for salvation? If you say yes to the question, you offend the Jews, and that's the end of the dialogue.
No. They haven't said they're offended by that yet, have they? I mean,
so well, yes.
It's implied that they
Yes, they have.
Because they're not going to get baptized.
Well, isn't it, a Jew is by definition someone who refuses to be baptized, right?
I would say.
It seems that way.
Because they don't feel they need to be saved.
No. So if you answer no, well then you're denying Catholic teaching. So what are you going to do? You're damned if you do and damned if you don't, it seems to me.
Well, the dialogue ends
right?
at that point.
So what happened here? After 50 years, the Vatican decided to get together and write a document, which we've already talked about here. I've written an article on it, of what is our experience of 50 years of Catholic-Jewish dialogue. And basically the answer is it got nowhere. It failed. And they admit that it failed. And there are two contradictory, the Scylla and Charybdis here of this dialogue are, on the one hand, the covenant is eternally valid, which we have to affirm. And on the other hand, baptism is necessary for salvation, which we also have to affirm. Well, they are mutually exclusive. Okay? You can't say both. Because so let's say you want to have dialogue. Well, dialogue is going to come down to the point of you're going to talk and you're going to talk and you're going to talk. And then whoever it is, whatever Jew you're talking to, is going to reach the point where he's on his deathbed. And at that point, he's either going to be baptized or he's not going to be baptized. And if he is baptized, he has the chance of going to heaven. If he's not baptized, he doesn't have a chance of going to heaven. But not to say that every unbaptized person is condemned to hell. We're not saying that. Okay? If you're a Yanomamo, if you're an Aztec and you're living in the 4th century BC, there is no way in the world you can know about Jesus Christ. And so it's possible for you to be saved because of invincible ignorance. If there's one group of people on earth that cannot claim invincible ignorance, it is the Jews. Okay? Because the gospel was first, the Old Testament was certainly first proclaimed to them. And after the crucifixion and the destruction of the temple, they created the Talmud. And the Talmud is full of mentioning Jesus Christ. In a blasphemous way, of course, that is calculated to keep Jews from converting to Christianity. So there's no way in the world. So push comes to shove, what's going to happen? You can dialogue all you want. You can dialogue till you're blue in the face, and ultimately it all comes down to, are you going to be baptized or not? If you're not baptized, you can't be saved. It's that simple. So what you're doing here by dialogue, you're creating an obstacle to baptism. And you will be held responsible for the Jews who did not get baptized. So the classic example of this in my book is Sam Shapiro, my late Jewish friend, the professor of history at Notre Dame, who was basically picked up when no one else would touch him because he had the reputation of being a commie. Lived in Cuba. Notre Dame hired him. Hesburgh hired him. And he was so grateful, he decided he's going to convert to Catholicism. He went to a priest at Notre Dame, and what did the priest tell him? Jews don't have to convert.
Really?
Now that priest will stand before God, and he will have to take responsibility for the fact that Sam Shapiro did not get baptized.
I mean, he was actually was willing to be baptized.
Yes, he was.
And the priest said, don't.
The priest told him not to get baptized.
Notre Dame priest?
Notre Dame priest. He didn't tell me his name, but he was a priest in the theology department at Notre Dame. Now that man will have to stand before God, and he will be held responsible for Sam Shapiro's fate. Sam Shapiro left this life without baptism. I came close and did not succeed. He was on his deathbed then. He said yes to me at one point, and then he said no, and then he died. Okay? So he refused baptism. Okay? Can you be saved if you refuse baptism? No theologian can say that that is possible. You can say maybe because you didn't know about it, but if you refuse baptism, you cannot be saved.
Well, baptism is the open confession that I've been baptized and Christ died, and I died with him. And when he rose, I believe I rise with him. It's the total belief.
You can't get around it.
It's the total belief in the resurrection.
You can't get around it. So here we are in basically a horrendous situation where because of Auschwitz, this German ex-pope is trying to square the circle.
But we don't. First of all, we don't know what the word covenant is exactly, and we don't know what Auschwitz is exactly.
We know. So we have basically an entire theology based on a non-existent foundation. None of these things are. How are we supposed to know?
If somebody has any doubt, what do you mean by covenant? That you can't continue the conversation until you clarify. For whoever,
there are other aspects here too. In Nostra aetate, it says the church condemns all forms of anti-Semitism. Well, what does that mean? I mean, the ADL. I mean, I already gave you the example of a name of a rabbi who has said that the gospel is anti-Semitic. So does that mean the church
against the gospel?
The church has to condemn the gospel because this guy's not even just any Jew. He's the vice president of the European Jewish Congress. And he should know what anti-Semitism is, right? And he said the Gospels are anti-Semitic, so the church has a duty to condemn the Gospels. This is the ridiculous situation we are in right now.
This is the dialogue we're in.
How is this dialogue going? This is the result of 50 years of dialogue, which our Pope Emeritus considers one of the great achievements of the Catholic Church, okay, that we've had dialogue for 50 years. And where has it led?
Dialogue, we don't even know what the definition of covenant is. We don't know what the definition of anti-Semitism or Auschwitz. And this forms the basis of the dialogue, and we don't even have a definition.
Yeah.
What kind of dialogue is that?
So the other thing is that the whole notion of mission, what do you mean mission? Mission, well, there have been... the church has had mission. Well, I don't know what you mean exactly. You mean a formal movement, an office at the Vatican which is responsible for the promotion of the conversion of the Jews?
Well, mission has to be at least a takeoff the Great Commission, you know.
Well, let's cut to the chase once again. I'm not going to read. I'm a Catholic. I don't read the Bible. But let's cut to the chase here. What about the Acts of the Apostles? The first pope. First pope went to Jerusalem. What was the first thing the first pope, who happened to be a Jew, what was the first thing that the first pope said to the Jews in Jerusalem? You killed Christ.
Acts chapter 2, 3,
That's what he
4,
said.
yeah.
It's in the Acts, the beginning of the Acts of the Apostles. At that point, they're cut to the heart. The Jews are cut to the heart. That's what it says. And then they said,
What do I have to do to be saved?
What do I have to do to be saved? Well, guess what he says? You need to be baptized.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and be baptized.
And you have to be baptized. And then it says that 5,000 of them were baptized on the spot. Now, that sounds like a mission to the Jews to me. It sounds to me as if St. Peter knew pretty damn well that what he had to say here was, you killed Christ, but you can be saved if you accept baptism. It seems to me that's the core of the mission here. And it was. It was. I mean, whether most Jews, whether the majority of Jews accepted Jesus Christ or not, it doesn't really matter. Some of them did.
Well, it was to the Jews first and then to the Gentiles. And for the first 10 years or so, it was totally primarily to the Jews. But that didn't mean it quit. It just leveled
Well, that
off.
seems to be the message here in Ratzinger's article, that we're on the same level somehow or other because we both accept the Old Testament. He goes into great detail talking about Marcion and how Marcion was the heretic who said that the God of the Old Testament was the devil and the Old Testament had no validity whatsoever and it should be removed completely from. No, that's not true. That's not true. But so he goes into detail about that. But we can't neglect to mention that there was violent rejection on the part of the Jews. That obviously some of them did accept Jesus Christ.
I think a lot of them did through those years.
But there was also, and the Jewish people killed Jesus Christ. I mean, it was the Jewish people. It was ratified. The leaders persuaded Pilate to do it, and it was ratified by the people who were there. So the Jewish people killed Jesus Christ. Okay? So the mission was clear. There was a mission at the beginning. Okay? And that wasn't the only mission. In the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, the book I wrote, I talk about the meeting between Rabbi Nicholas Donin, a Jew who converted, and Pope Gregory IX, that was orchestrated by St. Raymond of Peñaforte, who was the head of the Dominicans at that time. We're talking about the early years of the 13th century. And in that meeting, Nicholas Donin asked the Pope if he knew what was in the Talmud, and the Pope said, "What's in the Talmud? What's the Talmud? I never heard of this. What is it?" And he said, "It's a book, and it's full of blasphemies. Jesus is buried up to his neck in burning excrement. His mother was a whore." And the Pope is horrified, and he turns to Raymond of Peñaforte and says, "If this is true, you should confiscate the books and put them on trial. If it's true, you should burn the books." And then he said, "I want you, namely you, the mendicants, you, the Dominicans, and the Franciscans, to now orchestrate a campaign for the conversion of the Jews." And Raymond of Peñaforte then went back and told Thomas Aquinas to write a book, which is the Summa Contra Gentiles, which was the book that Pope Gregory ordered. And Raimundo Martini wrote a book, Ad Versos, the Pugeo Fidei, the Dagger of Faith, aimed at Jews and Moors. And what came out of this was the most successful conversion campaign in the history. Well, maybe not the most successful, but one of the great campaigns. By the beginning of the 15th century, the Jews had left. They were gone from Western Europe. There was such a big exodus that the church had to debate what to do with all those empty synagogues. What do we do with them? Turn them into churches? What do we do with them?
But why did they all leave? Wouldn't they have said it was persecution?
No. I didn't say they all left. Most of them converted, and the Jews who would not convert, they went to Poland. So by the end of that period of time, Western Europe was pretty much emptied out. There were no Jews left. Now, the problem was it was so successful, it was too successful. And a lot of the Jews in Spain were falsely converted, and they remained a subversive element within Spanish society. And they were known as conversos. And the king and queen were, Ferdinand and Isabella, were winding up the final campaign of the Reconquista, which was basically driving the Moors out of Spain. And the Jews are collaborating with the Moors, and they're a fifth column, and they can't take it anymore, so they bring in the Inquisition to try and solve the problem. The Inquisition doesn't solve the problem, but so they expel them. Sorry, you're gone. And some of them went to Holland, where they became the avant-garde of the revolutionary movement there in alliance with England. And some of them went to Turkey, where they brought forth the flower of that movement, which was Shabbatai Zevi, the false Messiah. All that is covered in the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. But what is not covered in that book is the fact that Jews have continued to convert in spite of all this. And this is a book we brought out on converts, and it's full of stories of Jewish converts. One of the most famous recent ones was Bernard Nathanson, who basically is the reason why abortion is legal in the United States of America now. And Bernard Nathanson said explicitly in his writings that the abortion rights movement was a Jewish movement. He was
the head of it.
He and Lawrence later were the head of the Jewish anti-abortion movement in New York State. And there were other Jewish heads of the abortion movement in California. And between them, that's why we have abortion today. Now, what are we supposed to do here? I mean, pretend that they're our friends? Pretend that everything's great and that we can sit down and dialogue with these people as they go out and murder babies? Turn a blind eye to the whole thing and say, oh, well, he's not really a Jew, which is, he's a secular Jew, or he's a New York Jew. No, he said it. He said it was a Jewish movement. He said if it weren't for these crazy Jews in Greenwich Village, we wouldn't have abortion. And he said if the country knew that abortion was basically a creation of these crazy Jews from Greenwich Village, it never would have succeeded. And so they had to divert everyone's attention from that fact, and he says their strategy was to demonize the Catholic Church. Now, this man converted to Catholicism. Now, why did he do that? Why would you do that?
Partly because he felt bad for his sins.
Because his conscience convicted him. He was a murderer. He murdered thousands and thousands of babies, and his conscience was burdening him. And it weighed on him. Now, would it have been better? Let me ask you a question. Let me ask the theologians here a question. Would it have been better when Bernard Nathanson came to whoever it was, the priest, or was it Cardinal O'Connor or whoever? Would it have been better to say, oh, no, you Jews don't have to convert. And send this man off into the next life with no baptism, with the burden of thousands of murders on his soul? Would that have been doing Bernard Nathanson a favor?
Don't you think it seems like the Puritans got all fanatic and we're going to convert the Jews? Luther one time thought, my gospel will convert the Jews. But then you got the other side that says Jews can't be converted. It's almost impossible. And so you got two extremes.
Well,
the
Hitler version of this was basically that being a Jew is a function of DNA. And obviously, you pour that water over your forehead, it doesn't change your DNA at all. So if being a Jew is a function, as they say, I mean, they're the ones who say it, that you have to have a Jewish mother. You know, if you have a Jewish mother and you don't convert to Catholicism or Christianity, if you don't get baptized, you're a Jew. You're a Jew. So if it's biological, Hitler was only taking the Jews at their word. So you say it's biological? Okay, it's biological. You're a problem. The only way I can deal with a biological problem is to exterminate you. I'm not proposing that. I'm proposing conversion. I'm proposing baptism. Why are you calling me an anti-Semite?
Well, some people are frustrated that Jewish conversions, they just don't believe they can happen. I mean,
there are people, I
just feel it's too frustrating.
I get emails from people like this all the time. There are plenty of racists out there. There are people, biological determinism. Your behavior is determined by your biology. The Jew has bad biology, so there's nothing you can do about it, so don't waste your breath trying to convert the Jew. That is not the Catholic way. Or maybe, wait a minute, maybe it is the Catholic way. Maybe that is precisely what these people are saying.
Well, in a way, they're kind of circling around and ending up in the same position.
Maybe the position of that professor at Notre Dame who told Sam Shapiro he didn't have to convert is exactly the same position as Adolf Hitler. Maybe because they're both
that
saying,
would change who you are. This is who you are. We don't want you to change.
Because both of these people are saying there's no need to convert. Conversion is pointless. That's not my position. My position is conversion is necessary, and the church needs to work for the conversion of the entire world. Okay? And Ratzinger himself says, yes, that's one in the gospel, but there's one exception. Well, wait a minute. Who are you to... I know you're the Pope. But I mean, in a sense, who are you to countermand the statement of Jesus Christ, who said the entire world, go out and baptize the whole world? Mm-hmm. He didn't say except the Jews.
No, he said to the Jews first and then to the Gentiles.
The Jews first. Mm-hmm. So where did this come from? Why can't we just put an end to it right now? Okay, they have tied themselves up in knots for 50 years now. It has led to nothing but disaster for the world in terms of a Jewish promotion of wars in the Middle East, of abortion, of gay marriage, of pornography, of immigration, ruinous immigration in Europe. It has led to one disaster after another, and it's led to disaster for the Jews too.
But the parallel would be like there's a case where this girl, the school allowed this girl to change her genders, transgender operation, without telling the parents. But that's all right. But see, the reason they don't want, like here, we just read 1 Thessalonians, preventing us from speaking to the Jews so that they might be saved, or preventing us from speaking to the Gentiles. But that Jewish person, the family or the extended family of that Jewish person, they don't want any Jew being saved. They don't want the freedom granted to for you going to Israel and witnessing on their streets. They don't want to risk that.
No.
But that's not fair to that individual. Can't they have a choice? If they want to convert to Christ, shouldn't they have that opportunity? I mean, you're allowing these kids to, I want to be a boy, I want to have a sex change.
Reparation therapy, which is basically the therapy that allows a homosexual to break the bad habit of homosexual activity, is illegal in the state of California.
Which is like,
well, wait a minute. Do we believe in freedom of choice or not here? Well, the answer is yes, if you make the choices that the oligarchs want you to make. If you don't make those choices, no.
So they don't want that individual Jewish person to make the choice to turn to Christ.
So you don't want them to be saved, because there's only one way to be saved, and you enter salvation through baptism as through a door. There's no other way. It's in the Scriptures repeatedly.
Jesus said, there's only one name under heaven whereby you can be saved.
And there's only one gate, and that gate's narrow. There's only one gate.
And if that person believes that, can't you let them believe that? How do the other people?
So who's a friend of the Jew? Is it E. Michael Jones? Is he the friend of the Jew?
Well, you're trying to save it. You're trying to say, I believe what Jesus is.
I'm saying that the Jew, if you're a Jew like Bernard Nathanson, and you've got your conscience is burdened with thousands and thousands of murders.
He found salvation in Christ.
Am I doing you a favor by saying, oh, it's okay, it's okay? No, I'm not doing you any favors, because I'm denying you salvation. If I were to say to you, it's okay, you don't need to convert, I'm denying you salvation. So are these people denying Jews salvation? I think you could make that case. I'm sorry to say this, but this is dual covenant theology. That's what these people are preaching. There are two ways to be saved in this world, okay? You can be a Christian and you're saved by accepting Jesus Christ as the Lord and becoming baptized. Or if you're a Jew, you can be saved by killing Jesus Christ and participating in his death and rejecting him and everything he stands for. Now that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
No.
No, it doesn't make sense. No. So dual covenant theology does not make sense. So why are we doing it? Well, because of Auschwitz. It seems to me the second word in this article is Auschwitz. So there's some type of, what was the Vatican Council, a German operation? Yeah, I think it was. I mean, we know that it didn't start out that way. It started out as basically Cardinal Ottaviani going to Pope John the 23rd after the death of Pius XII and saying the church is in a mess. We are taking a beating. Now, this is all in what was called the preliminary documents, which were written by Ottaviani's office. He was the prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. he wrote documents that portrayed the state of Europe at this time, which we're talking about 1959, 1960. I've written this up in my book, John Cardinal Krol and the Cultural Revolution. The church is losing, okay? It's losing people, it's losing the allegiance of two people, stage right and stage left. Stage left, they're exiting stage left, is known as communism. The Soviet Union was a power at that point. A lot of people, Catholics, are leaving to become communists. The bigger danger is stage right, and that is the United States of America. And if you want some indication of the effect that that was having in Italy, watch Fellini's movie La Dolce Vita, which came out at the same time that Ottaviani is deliberating about this council. He's already made the announcement. He's already gotten John the 23rd on board. He's writing the preliminary documents, and I think he went to see La Dolce Vita because the problem of Americanization was large in his mind.
So in other words, if I'm hearing you right, communism on the left,
yeah,
and on the right, Americanism?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both of them are condemned in these preliminary documents. You know, and the same thing is happening in Germany at the same time. Huge crisis in Germany. We're reaching the end of the Adenauer era. There is a huge push on in Germany to sexualize the country. Mm-hmm. This began immediately after World War II.
I know that.
After the victory. The first plan was the Morgenthau Plan, which was basically to starve Germany to death. And that eventuated in what the Germans still called Das Hungerjahr, 1947. The warehouses of the occupying army, the American occupying army, are bursting with food, and the Germans are starving to death. And at this point, Cardinal Frings, the great Cardinal of Cologne, says you have a right to basically break into those warehouses and steal whatever you need in order to keep yourself alive. And he created a verb called Fringsen. Fringsen was the word for basically stealing. It's not theft when your life is at stake and people have more than they need. This is when Ratzinger is an impressionable young man. All of this is happening around this time. And what happened at that point was that the adults, at that time in American history, we had adults in the room. And one of the adults was George Marshall, the other one was George Kennan, and they came up with a new strategy, the strategy of containment. And so in the spring of 1947, June of 1947, George Marshall gave a speech at Harvard in which he said, "Hunger is the enemy, not the German people." Well, this was not the position of Henry Morgenthau, the Jewish Secretary of the Treasury under Roosevelt. The German people were the enemy. And there was one Jew after another writing books about how the German people should be sterilized. Every German male should be sterilized and set into slavery, slave labor for them. This is what the plan was, the Morgenthau Plan. And they realized, no, we can't do this. If the Germans starve to death, the Bolsheviks will come in from the Soviet Union and they'll take over all of Europe, and we don't want that. So suddenly the Germans are okay. And we have the Marshall Plan, and the Marshall Plan for everybody's prosperities around the corner, the Wirtschaftswunder, and so on and so forth. What people don't talk about is, okay, we decided we're not going to starve them to death, but we didn't give up on social engineering. And what you had at this point was the rigorous, most ruthless form of social engineering ever unleashed on the face of the planet. Even worse than what happened in the United States. And our Pope Emeritus Ratzinger was there as it was happening.
Happening to him.
Happening to him. It happened to him.
Well, wouldn't you say that the techniques of the expertise of psychology and what they learned in psychology and all those fields, it was coming to the forefront, and they were able to use them like never before?
Yeah. Well, they had a nation of guinea pigs I mean, those people had no choice in the matter. And it was much subtler than that. I mean, when they were starving to death, they knew that something bad was going on, but suddenly the whole situation changed, and suddenly you've got a currency reform, which was the basis, the beginning of the change, and suddenly people had money. And the same year, I am not exaggerating, the same year as the currency reform, we're talking about 1948, 500 tons of pornography gets smuggled across the border.
Just backtracking a little bit, historically, if you conquered an enemy, I think the word slave means to spare, because normally you just killed your enemy, historically. That's just kind of what people did. Well, that's human nature. I mean, in other words, what was driving the victors? The victors just went through a horrendous...
Wait a minute, you're talking, who was the victor here? Was it the WASP or was it the Jew? They were both involved in this thing.
Well,
And I'm saying the social engineering was a Jewish operation. It was first of all, psychology was Jewish. This was Jewish revenge. The Morgenthau plan, we're not going to go down that road. We need the Germans, but we don't just want to let them off the hook either. And so we'll unleash this vicious campaign of social engineering. And the basis of it was the sexualization of the German people.
Right, but instead,
and it began immediately.
But the whole world, Germany took on the whole world almost, okay? So the world wins. Under normal circumstances, they're just going to kill them all. Get rid of all the Germans. We're just going to get rid of them, which is what Morgenthau was. That's the instinct he was going on. But they didn't do that, but they came close. We're just going to wipe them out some other way. But that drive to do something to them was there.
And it was the Jews who were implementing it.
They weren't going to let go of that drive.
The social engineers. So in 1944, the American Jewish Committee organizes a conference on the authoritarian personality. Okay, and they brought over the Frankfurt School.
Well, Eric Fromm, that's all we were reading in college.
This was a Jewish operation, and the Frankfurt School became the heart and soul of the social engineering campaign against Germany. And the authoritarian personality was obviously referring to Germans, okay, but it got transposed to Catholic ethnics in the United States as well. They were victims of it as well.
I mean, why would it be?
So what conclusion did they come to? That sexual liberation is part and parcel of the democratic personality. And the sooner you have sex, the younger you are when you have sex, the more likelihood you are to have a democratic personality. This is a quote from the Frankfurt School. This is the way they were talking.
That's the way to fight authoritarianism, which is very evil.
And that's what happened. That is precisely what happened. And so in the piece I'm writing right now, I get into great detail about how the Germans were basically socially engineered.
People were walking around. I mean, I had a girlfriend, that's what she walked around. Art of Loving by Erich Fromm. And she didn't mean, let's go to church.
Yeah.
That's what people were reading.
So I think we need we have to put this on the table here, because we have to have some understanding of why the Pope would say Auschwitz. Why are we basing our theology on this type of historical event? Why are we doing this? You're clearly saying that that's what it was. There is a whole school of thought out there that says basically the Second Vatican Council, not the Ottaviani original documents, but the German hijacking of the Second Vatican Council, was basically as expiation for Auschwitz.
The official story of Auschwitz. The Auschwitz that you're not allowed to challenge in Europe.
Well, whatever he means, he's using that term, whatever he means by that is the basis for this brand new theological idea. He said it there. A total rethinking of this whole project.
Well, we know what he means by Auschwitz, because in Europe there's almost a legal definition of Auschwitz that you have to accept.
Yeah, and if you don't, you go to jail. So it's since Auschwitz, it was clear that the church had to rethink the Jewish question.
That's the first statement.
First sentence of the book. The question of the existence of the Jew, or Judaism, or however you want to Seit Auschwitz ist klar, dass die Kirche die Frage nach dem Wesen des Judentums neu bedenken muss. You have to think this. It was an imperative. You have to do that. So this is where we're coming from.
No, again,
where did his understanding of Auschwitz come from?
Let me just inject, like at Notre Dame, because you have the priests would come to Notre Dame during the summer, a lot of them, for seminars and that. And you saw so many signs for the last 50 years. So many bulletin boards, Auschwitz conference, or Holocaust usually, Holocaust this, Holocaust. That's all you were getting all the time.
Well, I'm trying to contextualize this. He grew up under the most ruthless campaign of social engineering that ever existed on the face of the earth. And the story is that basically the Catholics had made a valiant effort. So Cardinal Frings, the same man who told the Germans of Cologne that if they were hungry, they should break into the American warehouses and take whatever food they needed to feed their family. In 1951, we have a Hollywood movie produced in Germany called The Sinner, or Die Sünderin. The lady was a sinner, or the female sinner, okay? And it violates every norm you can imagine. A little bit of nudity, but it's basically an attack on the church's teaching on suicide. Anything decent, it's there to attack. The actress is a lady, Hildegard Knef, who had been a star under the Nazis, but hey, let's let bygones be bygones. She marries a Jew who's an American soldier. They move back to Hollywood. They go to Hollywood. She gets a contract in Hollywood. And then suddenly, wait a minute, she's back in Germany. It's 1950 and she's back in Germany. What the hell are you doing in Germany in 1950? You like rubble? And so the movie comes out in 1951. And now Frings is calling for civil disobedience and basically the picketing, if not the burning down of movie theaters. It just went from one thing to the other because he saw clearly that this was an attack. Now wait a minute. We're talking about a time here in Germany where every single publication, every single book, every single magazine, and every single movie had to have a license from the Americans in order to be performed or read or produced.
Yeah, which Americans too?
Well, wait a minute. This is a Hollywood movie. This is a lady who just came from Hollywood. The Americans had to give approval for this thing, and the German Catholics immediately see it as a total attack on their culture, and they have their own organization now called the Volkswachtbund, the People's Protection League. Or we would call, ours was called the Legion of Decency.
Is this, this is probably bad. People make the example all the time with the Confederacy, the Confederate flag and then the Nazis. Well, the Southerners had to fight back because the Reconstruction was trying to reconstruct them to the point of absurdity, right? So the Germans did fight back.
They did fight back. And they fought back in the way that they, in the way completely compatible with civil society, the norms of civil society. There was no night riders and lynchings in Germany. I guarantee you that. Okay, it didn't happen.
But it's normal to fight back. If they don't fight back,
they're reacting to this, the Volkswachtbund, and they have a campaign. The campaign is against Schmutz und Schund. This is part of the problem here. What is Schmutz und Schund?
Dirt and...
I translated it as filth and smut. Okay, now you can already feel people cringing. Filth and smut? Why are you talking this way? This is embarrassing. Okay, but that's the terminology, and they wanted to defend Sittlichkeit, which was their term, another problematic term because it sort of means custom, but it also means the moral law. So is it a social construct or not? Anyway, that's what's going on.
But the Germans knew.
They knew what it was, and the result was there was a battle, and the result was the church basically killed its own organization. They were embarrassed by it. And so the question is,
where... the church had already been kind of co-opted.
Because the Americans brought over Kinsey, and Kinsey obliterated the anti...
Oh, they bought into Kinsey over there?
Yeah, hook, line, and sinker.
Right here from
Hook,
Indiana.
Line, and sinker, yeah. Our fellow Hoosier. And that's the story. And the question is, at this point, to bring it back to where we are, where was Father Ratzinger at this point? What is Father Ratzinger's position on the Volkswortbund, the Legion of Decency? Because we know many Germans were embarrassed by it, and you get the sense that the Vatican II was their way of basically distancing themselves from this type of approach. No longer. The state is our friend. Modernity is our friend. The Jews are our friends. We don't have any enemies anymore. And that's the message of Vatican II. And that's led to the disaster that we have today.
Is that because they were inclined, the state, we have a separation of church and state here. There they never did so much. And so they just kind of went with the state? They were inclined to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a better sense of that. Maybe.
We're more rebellious than the Germans are. But what state, what are we talking about? We've had almost 50 years of resistance to abortion. It's the same type of thing. The church has not turned its back on that, but the church in the United States was embarrassed by the Legion of Decency, and they pulled the plug on it. Read John Cardinal Crowell and the Cultural Revolution, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Read this book, to see that there are still Jews that are converting, and if Bernard Nathanson hadn't converted, guess where he'd be?
Be in hell.
Who's the friend of the Jew here?
So getting back to this hot issue here, how would you summarize where we're at?
We're worse off than we were when we began. The more you talk, the more confused things become. That's the one thing you can guarantee, because you're trying to reconcile two incompatible propositions. The covenant is valid. Baptism is necessary for salvation. You can't reconcile them.
It seems like the powers that be are embarrassed about many things.
Yes.
You know, and it's the very things, like Jesus said, who's ever ashamed of me and my words, of them will I be ashamed when I come back.
Yeah.
So, obviously, it's a great temptation to be ashamed on the teachings of Christ.
Yeah.
And to back off. And probably because you don't want to lose your rank in the pecking order, I guess.
Yeah, well, this man said it specifically. If this is true, then we lay to rest any notion that Ratzinger is a good theologian. So Ratzinger,
right.
he's going to be excommunicated. The Pope is going to be excommunicated from the Theological Society.
Right.
Get with the program.
You are a bad theologian. You get an F. We'll give you an F. Oh, it's that easy.
Thank you. Vielen Dank, Herr Böhnke. Herr Dr. Professor Dr. Böhnke. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like, the show is Israel, and this still is this dialogue, Jewish Catholic dialogue on who is Israel. They're still saying they are, and the church must say we are, and they're still fighting over who has title to that word.
That's right.
And it shouldn't be that hard, but apparently it is. So, Mike, thanks for coming on again. And this is Peter Helland on the show Israel.